All right, hello, welcome back, everybody. PayPal and Patreon and the YouTube membership things are down below if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. So, time for the monthly oil demand levels update. So, the U.S. been averaging on a plateau about 20 million barrels per day of oil demand for the past 2 decades or so, and came in right within the same zone as always, just a bit under this time at 19.4 million barrels per day. China continuing to look like it's leveling off at 17 or so, but we're going to have to wait a few more years to see. This time they came in a bit down at 16.4. India continuing to near 6 and is staying up near their previous record high of 5.88. This time coming in only a bit lower than that at 5.85 million barrels per day. Japan used to be up at 6 at their peak, but over the decades they've declined down to under 4 from a mixture of the rise and rapid adoption of fuel efficiency, mass public transit, and the aging of their population. So now they're usually in the upper 3s, this time coming in at 3.53 million barrels per day. Russia, during the USSR times in the 80s, had a demand level of about 5 million barrels per day. Not the whole USSR, just Russia within the USSR. And after the USSR collapsed, they dropped down towards 2. And as they rebuilt their economy afterwards, over the last couple decades, they climbed back up towards 4. But then, after invading Ukraine, in the economic fallout from that, they dropped down towards 2.7, 2.8. And then over the last year, they have climbed back up a bit from that low and are now seeming to stop around 3.1 or 3.2, this time dropping back down to 3.1 million barrels per day. South Korea leveling off a bit under 3, usually around 2.8, and they're on mostly the same trajectory as Japan demographically, so they'll be heading downwards soon as well. This time they came in just underneath their usual overall average at 2.79. Saudi Arabia fluctuating between 2 and 3 over the course of the year, higher in the summer, as that's when their electricity demand gets really high because it gets really hot, obviously. And about a third of their electricity is still generated by oil fired power plants. And this is their January data, so the opposite of summer. So they were at their low point of the year at 2.29 million barrels per day. Canada has stayed pretty flat, similar to the US, just obviously at a much lower number of about 2.5. This time coming in once again in range at 2.46. Brazil has gone up and down between a 2 and 3 over the last 15 years or so. Most recently, they went all the way down under 2 because of massive flooding in the southern part of the country that obviously brought basically everything in that region to a stop. However, that was weeks ago, and everything has mostly resumed. So they've come back up to 2.6 million barrels per day this time. Indonesia, mostly staying over 2 million barrels per day nowadays and continuing to climb. This time they had an abrupt drop down to 1.66. Germany, over the past few decades, has declined down from 3 towards 2, and this time they came in at 2.08 million barrels per day. Iran is usually close to 2, and this time they came in just under 1.8 for their domestic consumption. Mexico used to have a domestic consumption level of about 2, but post COVID recovery, they've never really returned to their prior demand levels and have stayed around 1.5 or 1.6. This time they came in a bit down further at 1.44. France was at about 1.6 pre COVID, and unlike the UK, they returned to 1.6 post COVID. This time, though, they came in a bit down at 1.46. The UK was also at 1.6 pre COVID, and post COVID, they only returned up to 1.5 and have seemingly settled in there as their new average. This time, coming in a bit down also at 1.37. Italy has declined down from 2 to around 1.3 on average in present day, this time coming in at 1.35 million barrels per day. Spain is also usually at 1.3. and this time came in right within range as well at 1.27. Thailand was up to about 1.3 or more before 2020, and post recovery, they've only gone back up to between 1.1 and 1.2, and looks like they're going to be leveling off here before inevitably following the same direction as Japan and soon South Korea. This time they came in at 1.17 million barrels per day. Turkey usually up around 1.2 or 1.3 in present day now and continuing to grow for the most part. This time they came in a bit down at 1.11. Singapore peaked up at about 1.4 in the 2010s, and the city state island has declined over the years now to about 1.1 on average, this time coming in right at 1.1 million barrels per day. Australia in present day is usually up between 1.1 and 1.2. This time they came in just a bit under at 1.05 million barrels per day. The Netherlands is usually or was usually around a million, but over the last year or year and a half, they started averaging more in the lower 900s. This time they came in a bit down from that as well at 869,000. Taiwan was also at about a million for a few decades. Now, over the last year and a half as well, they've started declining, averaging more around 900. This time they came in at 804,000. Iraq in present day is up around usually 800 or 900. And this time they came in roughly around 950. Malaysia is usually up in the 800s as well, but for the last couple months, they've been a bit down from their average, this time coming in at 600,000 barrels per day. Egypt is usually up in the 800s as well, and they're just a bit down outside of their normal range at 751,000 barrels per day. Poland is usually up around 800 now also, and they came in a bit down at 712. Was unable to get any new data from Argentina this time, but here's their overall graph just for you to see for a few seconds anyways. Belgium, once up close to 700, has now declined down to averaging more closer to 600 over the years, and they came in this time at 632. Was also unable to get new data from Nigeria or Colombia, but here are their graphs. Obviously, Nigeria first and now Colombia, who is up to averaging about 500,000 in present day and set a new demand record high most recently a couple months back at 555,000. The Philippines continuing their pattern of giving a few months of data once every few months. So we're still waiting for the next batch that they'll mass release soon. But last time they reported, they were at 513, and they have grown up to averaging about 500 in present day. Algeria is at 470, and that's right in their average range of present day. They are still growing upwards and are approaching 500,000. Their most recent record high was, I believe, 486. Kazakhstan is in present day averaging usually in the 400s, and they're starting to get closer to averaging 500. This time they came in again at right around 500,000 barrels per day for their domestic consumption. Chile is leveling off around 400,000, it seems, and this time they came in within range at 372. Morocco in present day is beginning to climb above 300,000 as they continue upwards, and they also do batch releases every few months where they were a bit over 300,000 after just previously setting a new record high as well. Sweden in present day is usually around 300, but this time they came in decently down at 238. Greece is usually also around 300,000, and they came in right within range at 285. Ecuador in present day is up to averaging basically rated about 300,000, and they set a new record high demand as well recently, but this time they came in back down a bit at 275. Peru, still waiting on some updates. Last one they gave us was months ago at 283, and they are up to averaging basically 300,000 in present day. Venezuela once averaged 800,000 at their height before the country collapsed in the later 2010s, and its oil demand went all the way down to only 200,000 or so. They recovered over the last few years up to about 300,000, but the last few months they've abruptly dropped back down under 200, this time coming in as low as 155,000 barrels per day. Romania in present day, usually around 250, coming in this time at 237. Portugal, also usually at 250, coming in this time decently down at 182. And then the collection of 200 range countries, at least the ones that reported their data this time, starting with Austria, usually around 200, and this time they came in at 207. The Czech Republic, usually in the same range, and they came in at 192. Hungary, decently down at 156. Switzerland, a bit down at 180. Finland, Suomi, a bit down as well, or getting close to being decently down at 175. And same with Norway at 176. All right, that's it for the ones that are included this time. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around and listening. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already. PayPal and Patreon are down there if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. There's a link in the description to a Google Drive with folders containing all kinds of different graphs and data compilations across all kinds of different topics and subjects. There's a link to my photography Instagram below that, and one in the top pinned comment to my cat's YouTube channel. May God bless and protect all of you, and I will see you all around next time.